BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? It's Robo from Allbark back with another video, and today we're going to my college football week 7 picks. We are finally at the best part of the year, 49 days straight of football, spending with weeknight college football and in the NFL. This week starts Wednesday night with Conference USA action, and then the weekend is loaded with top 25 matchups. There are a ton of good games littered throughout the week, but before we get into those games, let's go ahead and recap the week 6 results. Week 6 was a pretty average one for the picks. I said it was an ugly week, and it kind of was. I had a great win-loss record, but against the spread was about 500 for the first time in a few weeks. I had another good record in the toss-up games, though, and still have a strong ATS record on the season. So let's go ahead and try to get back to improving the yearly record with more conference play this week, and dive into a loaded Week 7, starting with Wednesday night. Week 7 starts with a Conference USA doubleheader Wednesday, and the first between Missouri State and Middle Tennessee. Missouri State is not really that bad of a team. Western Kentucky is a good team, and they hung with them until the end a couple weeks ago, even after losing our starting quarterback. He is questionable for this game, which honestly makes this game unbettable to me, but on the other end, Middle Tennessee has looked disastrous, especially compared to preseason expectations. Home field advantage does matter here in conference, but they've been too bad to back for me, and Missouri State's playing decent football right now at least. I don't know how they're going to look on the road though, so this is not one of my favorite plays, but I'll take Missouri State here, 27-21. Next on Wednesday is Liberty at UTEP, another really tough game to pick as both teams are 1-4, but I'll do my best to break it down. UTEP had some hype preseason as former 5-star quarterback Malachi Nelson is the quarterback, but his hype has died down a bit as both he and UTEP has struggled this year. And Liberty is usually one of the better teams in the Conference USA. They are not playing well this season and are really banged up, and starting quarterback Ethan Vasco is questionable, but likely back this week. So maybe Liberty's offense finally comes to play on the road, and their defense has looked decent this season. But the home spot here with Liberty's injuries could be a great time to pick UTEP. Liberty has just struggled a ton on the road in the past and are 0-3 on the road this season. So this is a complete toss-up to me, but I'll take the home dog in UTEP, 20-17. The Conference USA football continues Thursday with Louisiana Tech at Kennesaw State. Louisiana Tech is the best team in the Conference USA this season in my opinion so far. It's definitely them or Western Kentucky, but Louisiana Tech's been great this year and even competed with LSU on the road earlier this season. They've beaten some decent teams and have shown up on the road as well already. So although Kennesaw State is a better team this year from last and has some real playmakers on their roster, I really like this Louisiana Tech team. They might just be a wagon in terms of running through this conference. So I'll roll with them again on the road here, 31-21. East Carolina at Tulane looks like a really good game this Thursday, with an elite matchup of a great passing offense against a great front seven. Tulane can flat out get after the quarterback and play some great defense. They beat up Duke earlier this season, who looks great right now, and also obliterated Northwestern in Week 1. East Carolina can absolutely rip the football through the air, but Caden Hauser's been turnover happy in the past, and Tulane has some DBs who can make plays and change the game. I just think their defense stands out enough in this matchup as a difference maker, on top of hosting this game at night. So I'll roll with Tulane taking a pretty fun game this week by 10, 34-24. Back to the Conference USA, Jacksonville State is at Sam Houston this week, and to keep it short, Sam Houston is absolutely awful this season. They were barely competitive Week 1 and haven't been since, and we saw more of that last week where they got absolutely demolished in that second half by New Mexico State on the road. Maybe at home something could change here, but Jacksonville State has put together a couple solid games defensively, and Sam Houston's defense is the worst in the conference by a mile. Gavin Wimsatt is not a good quarterback, but this should not be a difficult spot for him. So I'll take Jacksonville State here to continue the winless season for Sam Houston, 30-17. Southern Miss at Georgia Southern is another coin flip game to me. The schedule crew did a great job, honestly, as the weekday slate could be filled with entertaining games. And with this matchup, Georgia Southern preseason would have been the pick for me, but they really haven't played good football much because their defense can't stop anything. Southern Miss has played well on the other hand, led by Braylon Braxton, and you can really tell half this team came from last year's championship Marshall team. But Georgia Southern is 2-0 at home this season, and I still believe in their offense. Their schedule's been brutal at this point, playing Fresno State, USC, and James Madison all on the road already. And I think while this is a super tough game, it's a good chance to finally get back in the win column against someone in their playing field. So I'll take Georgia Southern as a home dog this week, 35-31. Now on to Friday, starting with the Group of 5 game of the week, and it's not particularly close. South Florida at North Texas should be an elite matchup and super fun to watch as a viewer. North Texas is a very good team. They can flat out score points on anyone in the Group of 5, but I just don't really think they're a better team than South Florida. South Florida has some dogs on that roster and a veteran quarterback who I really trust to win big games. North Texas has been in some fights against teams I'd expect South Florida to beat pretty comfortably, like Army and Western Michigan. So I gotta trust Byron Brown and a quality USF defense to get it done on the road with playoff implications at risk here. 37-34. Washington is back home this week hosting Rutgers after narrowly escaping Maryland with a win to bounce back from that Ohio State loss. This is obviously a cross-country travel game for Rutgers coming all the way from New Jersey, but at least they had 2 weeks of prep time and rest to offset that. But the hang-up for me is the Rutgers defense. It just has not performed this season at all, and Washington really came alive in that second half against Maryland. I don't really love this spread above 10, but I think I'll lay it thanks to Washington's offensive ability with Coleman, Boston, and Williams, and Rutgers having clearly a bad defense they can take advantage of. But I do expect them to score a bit themselves here, so I'll go with a 38-24 final. Our final weeknight matchup is in the Mountain West with Fresno State playing at Colorado State. Fresno State didn't look very good last week at all and narrowly escaped a bad Nevada team with a win, which is definitely scary. But Colorado State has 0 offense right now, and I think the majority of the reason they scored some points on San Diego State was just how fast the Aztecs were scoring on them. That game turned into a blowout type of shootout pretty quick, so I don't really think it means much for the offensive standpoint for the Rams, but maybe it is positive momentum. Regardless, they have a terrible run defense and the second worst offense in conference statistically still. I gotta think Fresno State bounces back offensively and wins this one, 33-21. On to Saturday, we'll start with number 1 Ohio State on the road at number 17 Illinois, and I don't really expect this game to be close at all. I've been lower on Illinois all season and even in the preseason. They're also a pass-heavy offense as their offensive line doesn't get much push in the run game, so I don't see any chance they get things going against this Buckeye secondary and pass rush. Ohio State's offense is getting better and better every week as Julian Sayin gets more and more comfortable. Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith are unstoppable, and I really do not know who is going to score on Ohio State with consistency this season until they go into Ann Arbor in the season finale. So give me Ohio State to win here comfortably, 34-13. Over to another elite matchup this week. Alabama is on the road at Missouri. Ty Simpson is my current Heisman favorite, and this wide receiver core is disgusting for Alabama. I think it's fair to say Ryan Williams is a wide receiver 3 in this offense right now. Jeremy Bernard is incredible, as is Isaiah Horton. But with that said, this will not be an easy game at all, as Missouri is very good and rested as they had a bye and played UMass the week prior. But Bama has been rolling since the Florida State loss, and I really believe in that offensive line's growth and this offense being able to score on the road. But this is definitely a toss-up, as I really do respect Pribula and Hardy. If Bama comes out flat on the road like they have in the past besides the Georgia game, Missouri can steal this game, but I'll trust their offensive growth to get this one done again, 30-23. Florida State is a team I was lower on entering the year. Then they beat Bama and looked incredible for a few weeks, but have since been figured out and look exactly like we thought they were originally. A fringe top 25 team at best, with quarterback and Tommy Castellanos, who just struggles at times through the air and makes mistakes. I still believe in this team being a tough out and better than most in the ACC, and getting this Pitt matchup at home is great, but I also like this Pitt defense enough to think they can lose by single digits at the worst. And that freshman quarterback looked really good last week against Boston College, so I'll roll with Pitt covering a spread in the double digits, but Florida State to snap that 2-game losing streak in the ACC, 31-27. UCLA just pulled off the upset of the year last week, taking down Penn State as near 30-point underdogs. What an unbelievable watch that was, but now they're going to go on the road looking to follow it up with a win at Michigan State. This Sparty team has proven they can hang in games and cover, and they've been pretty solid in the first half of games. The passing offense can score points on some good teams like USC and Nebraska. It's really just about putting together 2 halves and Aiden Childs being more consistent. I really don't love this MSU team, but I still think that UCLA win was very fluky. And this is obviously a sell high spot, having to travel all the way across the country against a team who's desperate to get back in the win column with Indiana and Michigan next. I'll roll with the Spartans at home until I see Nico lead this offense to wins multiple times, honestly. 34-24. Next is Stanford at SMU. This SMU team is definitely good, but I think it's obvious to say they're kind of been underachieving this season. They let Syracuse backdoor cover them last week, and they've struggled to win the tough games on their schedule in Baylor and TCU, not to mention a road struggle at Missouri State earlier in the year. And Stanford has started to show an offensive pulse lately, scoring 20 on the road at Virginia and 30 on San Jose State. This team is still bad and could get blown out, but I think Stanford can make this a game slightly with how lackluster SMU's been this season, and 20 points is just a bit much for me to lay looking at the history. So I'll take SMU to win this one, 37-21. Cincinnati just picked up 2 huge wins back-to-back over Kansas and Iowa State, and while Brendan Sorsby isn't super accurate at quarterback, he's a proven baller, and that offense is really cooking right now around him. The defensive line is one I trust to get some push, and this UCF team is not one I see being overly competitive for 4 quarters in this game on the road. They've got some injuries, and I really haven't loved what I've seen from them this season. I think Cincinnati should continue rolling this week against a team they should be able to just physically outmatch. I'll take the Bearcats 35-20. Houston is back on the road after the Texas Tech loss this week, and I think this team has proven to be pretty average at best. They don't have a great run game, and they play a little slow, and Connor Wegman has been really hit or miss. But I expect the pass game to eat here as they have some weapons, and the Oklahoma State defense is terrible in the secondary. I just think with how we saw Houston perform 2 weeks ago on the road at Oregon State, that slow play could happen again, and Oklahoma State sticks around late in this game to cover a spread up over 2 scores. So I'll take Houston to win this one on the road as they're definitely better, but Oklahoma State keeps this one close, 28-17. James Madison is back home this week hosting Louisiana, who's coming off a bye, and while Louisiana's last game was a 50-piece overtime thriller with Marshall, James Madison's defense is very, very good and just not going to allow much at all to them in this game. They gave up just 7 points last week to Georgia State, who sure is just as bad in offense as Louisiana, but this defense keeps looking better and better and has manhandled the trenches and even compete with Louisville. So I really struggle to see Louisiana scoring points here on the road, and JMU has to be better offensively this week. I was shocked at their offensive level of play last week. Barnett is better than that, but it should be enough of a wake-up call to get them rolling again. So I'll go 34-13. Army is home this week taking on Charlotte. This Charlotte team has been terrible this season and hasn't scored much at all, but they're getting a bit healthier, and their third-string quarterback Zach Wilke performed pretty well last week against South Florida, where they put up 26 on the road. Army is obviously a better team, though, and has been tested playing all of Kansas State, North Texas, and East Carolina so far this season. With that said, I still don't like Army enough to take them by 3 scores in this game. I mean, it took them a while to get going against UAB. It was just 10-7 at the half against an atrocious UAB defense. So this one depends on how bad Charlotte plays, but I'll take them to cover reluctantly because of my non-belief in Army. 28-13. Over to the MAC, Miami, Ohio is at Akron this week. I was super low on Akron this year because of the academic ineligibility, on top of them just being a bad team. But Akron's defense has been decent, and while the offense is very hit or miss, they put it together a couple times this year, including last week's win over Central Michigan. With that said, Miami, Ohio is a better team than Central Michigan to me. That doesn't mean I like the Red Hawks big in this game, but they definitely should win as Daquan Finn is a playmaker that Central just didn't have in their offense. It'll be interesting to see which Akron team shows up as they could definitely cover, but I really would not bet either side, honestly. I'll take Miami, Ohio by about 10 though, 27-17. Toledo is back from a bye and on the road this week at Bowling Green, and last time out, Toledo proved they are arguably the best team in the MAC, but they do not always play as the best team in the MAC, especially on the road. To be honest, this conference is littered with terrible football, and it's extremely hit or miss with who shows up and where, home or away. So in this case, we've seen up and downs with Bowling Green, and this is not a terrible matchup for them as Toledo's offense has been terrible on the road, and I do like some of the pieces in the Falcons' defense. So I'll take Bowling Green to cover a double-digit spread above 10, but Toledo escapes with the win, 27-21. Trinidad Chambliss continues his ascension this week as Ole Miss hosts Washington State. What a baller he's been after being inserted into this offense following the Austin Simmons injury. I see no way Simmons gets his job back unless Chambliss struggles big time next week. But looking at this matchup, Washington State has looked better with Eckhoff at quarterback, but they do not match up here at all. Lane Kiffin offenses can score at will, and I can see them racking up near the 50s if they play to their standards. But this is a clear look-ahead spot. They're on the road at Georgia next week, and there's real potential for a backdoor here. So I just can't side with a point spread all the way up into the 30s here. I'll take the Rebels big, though, 42-13. Northern Illinois at Eastern Michigan is another ugly MAC matchup this week. Eastern Michigan cannot stop the run at all this season. So while NIU's offense has been pretty non-existent this year, they have a sizable defensive advantage, and I would be surprised if they allow Eastern to score much in this game, even with it being in Ypsilanti. Eastern drains clock and really tries to run it themselves, and NIU can take advantage of that, get stops, kill possessions, and win this game with whatever offense the EMU defense gives them on the ground this week. So I'm going to take NIU on the road to get it done, as I just can't trust that Eastern defense. 2017 Huskies. This UMass-Kent State game might be the worst game of the entire season. 2 of the bottom 5 teams in the FCS, arguably. But honestly, I think this Kent State team has improved a lot from this year to last. A lot more than UMass did, at least. And even this season, I've seen the improvement here and there, and I just have not gotten that from UMass at all. I think Kent State is going to be pretty desperate for a home win here, knowing who they're up against and how strong of a possibility it is. And they come out and play a good enough game with enough fire to get it done. But it'll probably end up being ugly regardless. I'll go 24-20 Kent State for a final. Next is the highest ranked matchup of the week as Indiana heads out to Oregon. I've been riding with Indiana a lot, literally since the very start of last season as a real believer in Curt Cignetti. But I will say, I don't expect Indiana to step up in this spot. They've struggled against the true elite teams while beating up on the others, and I think Indiana is just a really quality playoff contender that's just not a real title threat like in an Oregon or an Ohio State. and Oregon comes into this game rolling. Dante Moore is building a real Heisman case, and this win would push Oregon into number 1 team in the country talks. I just really respect Dan Lanning and the Ducks and don't see them dropping this game, honestly. I'll take Oregon 34-24. On to the Red River rivalry. This game is always tough to pick, but even harder this year as John Mateer's status is heavily in question. It was originally assumed he'd be out and Michael Hawkins would be the starter, which gives Texas a clear shot. But now we're hearing Mateer may return early from his hand surgery and play in this game if he continues to progress enough. I don't necessarily love that, but Texas's pass rush has underperformed, and this Oklahoma team could keep him out of injury risk enough to be effective. And on the other end, I really do not see Texas scoring with any consistency. Oklahoma's defense is top 3 in the country in my opinion, and Arch Manning has just been terrible. I'm going to take Oklahoma regardless, but feel a lot more comfortable if Mateer plays. I'll go 20-17 for a final. Georgia Tech hosts Virginia Tech this week. This Virginia Tech team is in a weird spot. They fired their head coach and have had up and down performances the past 2 weeks. Last week was a look-ahead spot, I guess, but Wake Forest is not a good loss at all, and to make it worse, it was at home. With that said, this Georgia Tech team has a history of underperforming against bad teams while showing up against good ones, and again, hasn't been good against the spread this year. I think they'll be sleeping on the Virginia Tech team as usual, who proved a couple weeks ago they can hang around by beating NC State. The Georgia Tech defense just is not a great unit and could definitely be scored on, so I at least expect 2 to 3 scores from the Hokies here. Give me Georgia Tech by 10, 31-21. Over to Notre Dame and NC State. Notre Dame is back in the playoff conversation up at number 16, but with their backs against the wall needing to run the table to make it in. And they've been playing some really good football lately. The running game is elite, and despite CJ Carr not having his best day last week against Boise State, he's shown a ton of promise, and I expect to bounce back against an atrocious NC State defense. However, looking at this spread, I actually lean NC State covering here. They can score on anyone really with CJ Bailey at the helm. I really like his upside as a quarterback prospect, and he's got legitimate weapons around him. But at the end of the day, Love and Price should have a huge game for the Irish. So despite a spread over 3 touchdowns being too much for me, Notre Dame's going to take this game comfortably. I'll go 38-20. Iowa State is in a really tough spot right now with several key injuries, including being without their top 2 corners for the season. And those 2 were arguably their 2 best defensive players in general. That is a massive issue, as we saw last week, where they just could not stop Cincinnati at all. And it can also open up the floodgates with the ground game. Colorado has a quarterback problem, but they also have the weapons to throw all over this Iowa State team, and I've seen Salter get hot in the past. They've got to be pumped for this matchup as well, seeing Iowa State be a little vulnerable now. Iowa State could most definitely take this game as the better team, but I really like this spot for Colorado at home. So I'll roll with the Buffs this week, close, 27-24. Penn State is back home this week after an embarrassing loss to UCLA, and after seeing that game, I really would not bet on this game, honestly, but I feel like Penn State has to bounce back from that. I think we all know Penn State is a very talented team on both ends. I mean, we just saw them compete with Oregon the week prior, but they have a real issues to work out. Drew Aller has continued to underperform, and now the defense is getting killed, but I'd assume this week of practice will light a fire in these guys with their backs against the wall now. As an unranked team, their only chance of making the playoffs is winning out and finally beating Ohio State. So after hearing they plan on getting the ball in Katron Allen's hands more this week, I'll take Penn State to bounce back finally, 35-10. Nebraska is on the road at Maryland this week, and there's no doubt they underperformed against Michigan State, especially in that first half where Raiola struggled a bit, in my opinion. But it was enough to get it done, and by a pretty good margin, even after a late score from Sparty. This week they're on the road against a Maryland team who has looked a lot better than we thought, but absolutely collapsed against Washington, and I kind of think that loss could bleed into this game. I really like Malik Washington, but Nebraska's defense can make some plays and get to the quarterback. I'd expect a tight game here, but I do like Nebraska's offense to capitalize this week and take over to grab the road win, 27-24. Next is Wake Forest at Oregon State. This Oregon State team is flat out awful. They're 0-6 for a reason, but this has to be a win for them if they want to finish the season with any momentum at all. Wake Forest is not a good football team. Competitive, sure, but this might be a bad spot for them, having to travel across the country on the road to play a winless team who has to be hungry knowing this is a winnable game. I think it's fair to say Wake Forest's locker room has better vibes, which can definitely matter, but Oregon State has to be desperate at this point. It's really now or never. As I've said so many times, Robbie Ashford just is not it at the quarterback position. So I'll take the Beavers to finally pick up a win this week close, 24-23. TCU is on the road this week at maybe a surging Kansas State team. The Wildcats offense is finally getting things going after Dylan Edwards came back a few weeks ago, and they've looked themselves finally. But I still think the TCU offense should control this game. Josh Hoover is a stud. They have playmakers. They can run the ball. So I think they dominate this game offensively. But on the other end, Kansas State could be able to match them for a majority of this game, especially playing at home. This spread sits at just 1 point for a reason, as it's really a pick'em type of game here. But with the way TCU's played this season and knowing some of the playmakers on that defense, I'll ride with the Frogs to pick up the road win and stay competitive in the Big 12 here, 33-30. Air Force at UNLV has one of the highest game totals of the week. A lot to do with the defense being terrible, but Air Force has found a guy at quarterback in Liam Zarka. He's lit up Boise State, Hawaii, and Navy now through the air, and we know they can run the football as well. So considering how elite UNLV's offense has been this season, there's going to be a tons of points in this game. I don't really care that UNLV shut down Wyoming last week, as that offense is terrible and it was snowing in Laramie. But I also trust the playmakers on the UNLV side more in this spot, especially at home, to come out on top of the shootout. So give me the Rebels to take this one at home, but Air Force is going to keep the pace, 38-34. App State at Georgia State is next. Georgia State played their best game of the season last week against James Madison, but they still lost, and I really do not buy that as improvement yet. They still look terrible on paper and statistically, and I can easily see them regressing here against a lesser team. App State has some good players, and we've seen that offense come alive in huge spurts. Even last week at home where they took down Oregon State, who definitely has better players than Georgia State. It comes down to them performing on the road, and I think they will against a dejected Georgia State team this week, 31-23. Old Dominion is on the road this week at Marshall, and I still stick by what I've said all year. This Old Dominion team is great. Even though I haven't hammered them to cover all year, I really think they're one of the best teams in the group of five, and Marshall just is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Yes, this is a road game for Old Dominion. That absolutely does play a factor, but this Marshall team is just not good, offensively or defensively, honestly, and I think Old Dominion should roll in this game. As long as they come to play, Colton Joseph should get whatever he wants, and that ODU defense should continue to lock teams up. I'll take them to cover here, 35-17. Western Michigan hosts Ball State this week, who's coming off one of the more shocking wins this season, beating Ohio. That was maybe the most absurd final score of the week, as Ohio has looked like the top team in the MAC. They beat West Virginia and hung with Rutgers and Ohio State for a while, but it just goes to show how ridiculous the MAC is. For Ball State, I think their O-line is good, but that's about it for me. Western Michigan's been great at home. They even beat Toledo there a couple weeks ago and nearly upset North Texas earlier in the season. So I just don't see Ball State competing this week, especially off a win that big, which can take a lot out of a team. Give me the Broncos at home here, 28-17. Navy at Temple could be a great matchup. Temple really surprised me last week, beating UTSA. Pretty impressive win that I didn't really expect, honestly, as I was pretty high on UTSA. But I think it's clear Temple is a pretty solid team at home against Group of 5 schools. However, this week's going to be an even bigger test, as Navy is one of those elite Group of 5 teams with an unstoppable offense. And I think it's really hard to take on quality teams in back-to-back weeks. But seeing how well Temple played, I definitely expect them to compete here. Maybe even pull off another upset, but I still have a lot of belief in Navy in that offense thanks to Blake Horvath and Eli Heidenrich. So I'll roll with Navy to come away with a gritty win on the road by a touchdown, 31-24. Tennessee hosts Arkansas this week, and I think it's obvious based on final scores this season that the Arkansas defense is absolutely awful. They can score on pretty much anyone, but they've gotten shredded left and right, which makes this a really tough matchup, as Tennessee is a very good team with a potent offense and some playmakers on defense. I trust that offensive line and Joey Aguilar to keep balling. Chris Brazzell has become unstoppable, and like I said, the Vols defense has guys who can make plays and limit Arkansas's offense from scoring at will, pretty similar to how Notre Dame did. And while I like Taylon Green here and there, I just don't think he's going to keep up long enough when they just cannot stop Tennessee in this game. So I'll take the Vols 41-24. UAB at FAU is a pretty rough game. These defenses are terrible, and both offenses can score, but UAB is god-awful this season and terrible on the road lately. There's something like 0-15 in the Trent Dilfer era, I'm pretty sure, so I've just seen no reason to back this team on the road in any scenario. FAU's been playing some good football lately, taking down Rice last week and hanging with Memphis before a big fourth quarter the week prior. I trust this offense to score pretty much at will, and although UAB will get their own, I'll take FAU to win by at least a touchdown and continue the struggles for Dilfer's Blazers, 38-30. Now to the night game, starting with Florida at A&M. I think this Florida team could be turning the corner. We finally saw some good quarterback play out of Lagway. The offense finally put together a good game against a very high-quality defense, and Dallas Wilson has started his true freshman breakout. And the defense continues to make plays to keep them in games. This is going to be another extremely tough game against a great Texas A&M team that I've been very high on this year. But there's no doubt Marcel Reed has not been playing great at quarterback. He needs to be better in this game if they want to cover, and I think Florida hangs around again here as A&M sweats out the win because of their defense. I'll go with a 24-17 final for A&M. Next is Iowa at Wisconsin. This Iowa team genuinely impressed me a couple weeks ago. They should have won that game against Indiana. They already beat Rutgers on the road this year, and I really don't think Wisconsin's even better than Rutgers. The offense is non-existent. They're on their third-string quarterback right now. The defense is okay as they can win off the line. But if Michigan didn't drop several passes and have penalties nullifying big plays, they obliterate Wisconsin and Bryce throws for 350. Iowa's offensive line is simply a better unit than Michigan's was last week with 2 guys out. And I think that push they'll get would allow them to run the ball with success, while Wisconsin has very little to no answer on the other end. So give me Iowa here, 21-14. We had a hail game in Wyoming last week, which is usually a competitive advantage for Wyoming, but it didn't matter much last week as they played UNLV. If the weather's bad again this week, it could be tougher for San Jose State, but the Spartans looked really good last week against a good New Mexico team, and they nearly beat Stanford the week before. It looks like they're finally breaking out to who we thought they were preseason, and they've got real weapons on the outside that can make this offense super explosive. And I know Wyoming's offense cannot score points even on bad defenses, as we've seen this season. So I'll ride with San Jose State on the road regardless of the environment, 24-20. UL Monroe is on the road this week at Coastal Carolina, and I'll say it again, I really like this ULM coaching staff. They've performed well against lower level teams, and I think the Northwestern line last week was proof of that, although that game did not go even remotely close to plan for ULM, as I kind of figured. But Coastal Carolina has been abysmal this season outside of one game against South Alabama, and just got absolutely dominated last week. I'm going to trust a better coaching staff and a better team on the road this week with a tight spread. Give me ULM 27-17. Texas Tech is an elite team in college football this season, the best in the Big 12 right now, pretty much unanimously. So while Kansas is a solid team, I don't really think they're going to keep up here on the road, especially with how good Texas Tech's defensive line is. They can shut down the run, and Kansas just does not have the receiving threats to keep the offense balanced enough to hang. And I know Texas Tech's offense is going to get pretty much whatever they want here. The receiving core is just so good, and they can run it all over you too. Getting this Kansas matchup at home in a rowdy environment at night is a great spot to trust the Raiders to roll, in my opinion. So I'll take them to cover here, 38-21. Georgia at Auburn has game of the week potential Saturday night. Georgia has proven they can beat good SEC teams on the road earlier by beating Tennessee, but this Auburn defense could cause some problems that Tennessee just couldn't do it. However, Jackson Arnold may not be a guy who can make enough plays to win this game against the Georgia defense, but I just don't really buy this Georgia team in this spot on the road. Auburn has some dogs, they're good in the trenches, and this being a night game could be huge for the crowd getting involved. They seem to play a lot better at home, and their defense is very, very good. I expect that pass rush to get home against a weaker Georgia O-line. And on the other end, Auburn does have playmakers who can get things going for Arnold if he gets them the football. So I'll take Auburn in an upset, 26-23. Michigan at USC is a real coin flip game to me. Michigan has found their passing game. I'm not sure why it took so long to realize Donovan McCulley and Andrew Marsh need as many targets as possible. But the more targets they get, the less drops Bryce Underwood has to deal with. He's got a 59% completion percentage, but they lead the nation in drops, and his adjusted percentage is in the high 70s. Bryce is just a dude to me at quarterback. Unreal IQ and arm talent for an 18-year-old. I expect him to perform against this USC defense as he's getting his number one lineman and a starting tight end back healthy for this game. The question will be, can Michigan stop Jaden Mayava, Makai Lemon, and Wayman Jordan? This offense is incredible, but the Michigan pass rush is absolutely elite on the other end as well, and they can definitely cover. So I'm going to take Michigan on the road to lean on that defense and get this one done, although very lightly. I'll go 30-27. Minnesota plays Purdue this week, looking to get back after the blowout loss to Ohio State. I still know this Minnesota team can throw the football. I like Drake Lindsey quite a bit, especially his upside. And Ohio State's defense is so good, I don't even blame them for only scoring 3 points in that game. I think this is a perfect bounce back spot against a bad Purdue team that they should be able to push around in the trenches. There really hasn't been much positive with this Purdue group this season. The offense has found ways to move the football and score, but they've given up 56 and 43 to Notre Dame and Illinois in recent weeks. And this is just their second true road game to this point. I think Minnesota has a clear advantage here and takes this one, 31-21. Clemson may have finally arrived to the 2025 football season, at least I think, because North Carolina is disastrous, so who really knows. But that was a beatdown. This week they're on the road again, taking on Boston College, who's brutally bad as well. This team lost to Cal at home, got obliterated by a Pitt team starting a true freshman quarterback, and now have to play a Clemson team that might have finally woken up and obviously has a ton of NFL talent littered through the roster. I think we may be starting to trust Clemson to beat up on these teams that are clearly outmatched finally. Only time will tell, but give me Clemson all day long here, 38-17. UTSA hosts Rice this week and is in need of a bounce back after last week's road loss at Temple. I think this UTSA team has definitely underperformed compared to preseason expectations, but they're still a quality team. And Rice is a bit of the opposite, outperforming expectations while not being as good talent-wise. But with that said, they do have a great running game, and the Roadrunner defense is prone to giving up points this season. I think we could see Rice score enough in this game to hang around, but UTSA should not drop this one at home, which could make them a decent parlay moneyline piece late Saturday night, but I believe in Rice's run game enough to cover, 30-20. LSU takes on South Carolina Saturday night under the lights, and honestly, this is not a game LSU can afford to lose. South Carolina's O-line and defense just is not great, and the LSU defense has some monsters who can definitely hold Lenora Sellers in check. Not to mention they're coming off a loss to Ole Miss a couple weeks ago and now have their backs against the wall as they eye the playoffs down the line. With that said, this offense still has not found any rhythm or real success, and I think it's really not trustworthy to put up enough points to cover spreads near the double digits, even in this spot. I know Lenora Sellers can score here and there, so knowing it should be a lower scoring game, I'll take LSU outright, but the Gamecocks cover, 24-17. This BYU-Arizona game is a really tough one to pick. Arizona's been playing great football for most of the season besides the Iowa State loss. Their offense is pretty trustworthy to score, especially at home, but BYU's defense is going to be a real test for Noah Fifita again as he struggled with the Cyclones defense a few weeks ago. On the other end, Bear Bachmeier looks like a stud, especially on the ground, but Arizona at night is a tough matchup, and BYU already struggled against Colorado on the road this season. I view Arizona as similar or a bit better than the Buffs, with a much better quarterback in my opinion, as Fifita has lit up teams in the past. So I'll rock with Arizona at home this week to end BYU's undefeated run, 24-21. Troy at Texas State could be a good matchup in the Sun Belt this week. Troy can run the football and likes to kill clock, which allows them to stay in games considering their defense is also pretty solid. And Texas State is a premier Group of 5 team and should be able to win this one at home, coming off a 1-point heartbreaker road loss to Arkansas State. But this line sitting at 9.5 makes it a pretty tough call, as it could go a number of ways, and I really don't like this game from a betting perspective. But since Texas State has struggled so much this season stopping the run, I'll rock with Troy to hang around both on the ground and defensively enough to cover. I just don't see Texas State dropping back-to-back games, especially not at home. I'll go 27-20 Bobcats. On to the late night slate with Boise. Boise State's defense has played great the past couple of weeks. They held Notre Dame in check with just 28 points despite Maddox Madsen throwing 4 picks, gifting Notre Dame free opportunities. And New Mexico last week did not look great on the road against San Jose State. I think Boise State is simply just a better football team, but 17 could be too many points for an offense as good as New Mexico's. I just know Jack Lane has really struggled with turnovers, and this Boise State team just had the 3-game stretch of near 50 pieces before the Notre Dame game. I think they get back to that offensive form at the home this week, and they beat New Mexico 41-21. Arizona State at Utah could be an elite late-night matchup. Arizona State has already won on the road in the conference this season, and Utah has a serious threat with Devin Dampier. But his passing ability against great teams is definitely questionable, and I think this ASU secondary is very, very good. They just need to limit Dampier on the ground in that rushing attack, and Arizona State is going to score points on the other end. Nobody can stop Jordan Tyson, in my opinion, and Levitt consistently finds him the football. I don't know if they're going to pull off the upset, but they're absolutely capable of it when they're playing at their best. So let me take them on the spread, as I think this game comes down to the final possession. I'll go with a 27-24 final, with the Utes surviving at home by the field goal. San Diego State keeps improving week to week, and it's great to see for them as their defense is already so good for the level of competition in the Mountain West. But Sean Lewis now has that offense starting to cook. Last week they absolutely demolished Colorado State's defense through the air and the ground, and this week they're on the road, but it's at Nevada. Middle Tennessee State beat this Nevada team earlier in the season on the road, so I gotta think the Aztecs keep it rolling with a much better defense and a better coaching staff. Nevada is just a disaster of a team this season who really surprisingly hung with Fresno State last week as the Bulldogs could not convert third downs, but they still dominated that box score. So I'll take the Aztecs on the road here, 28-17. Hawaii is back home this week taking on Utah State, and as the spread indicates, this game is yet another toss-up type of game, but I think I lean towards Utah State here. I think they're just a superior team and have a better coaching staff I've really trusted this year. They can score points on the road. They did it on Texas A&M, so there's no reason they can't score on the road at Hawaii, who just is not a great defense. They're coming off a bye week after upsetting Air Force on the road, so that offense can definitely make this one interesting. But I really like what I've seen out of Bryson Barnes and the Aggies offense. I'll take him on the road here, 34-28. That's it for my Week 7 picks. Let me know your thoughts on any of these games down below in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.